Hello, my name is Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. Lunacy Audio recently released a brand new update to their flagship effect, which is called Beam, which is a distortion unit called Volts. This is something that I'm really excited for because it adds a lot of dimension for this plugin. Typically in the past, this didn't really cater to designing things that were bass oriented. It was very good for drums. It was very good for like melodic content. But now with the distortion and saturation being introduced, we can finally kind of place this into a thing that's going to not only benefit all of the other things that I described, but also like reintroduce certain bass elements that we can utilize as rack building. So before I get started, this is on sale for $29 if you already own Beam. If you don't own Beam, then there is an introductory sale for $100 where I believe that you get all of the nodes, which the two premium ones that they have right now are Time and Volts. If you miss the sale or whatever, you can still get space, grains, and filter. This is something that if you watch my streams, I use something a lot. And this video is sponsored by Lunacy Audio, but I do want to say that, because I know that bias is an issue, that if I didn't like this plugin, I wouldn't have reviewed it. You guys know that I only review stuff that I'm interested in, and I'm here to show you why I think it's cool. So with that being said, I just wanted to give you all the information. Let's go ahead and listen to this drum break. And let's introduce, I think this is saturation, distortion, bit crushing, and something that's like upwards compression or something. Yeah, like some kind of tape or something like that. Sounds pretty good. We've got a filter here that if you push it to the right, it will become a high pass filter. If we push it to the lower end, it's going to become a low pass filter. And then here is some contour, and usually I just turn this up, but you can kind of continue to shape the sound after the distortion. So let's add some heat. To me, it sounds like this has something to do with the mids, maybe some kind of boost or bell curve or something like that. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So with this, we also have a feedback system, which I think is just a resonator or a very short delay. And what's cool about this is it's not quite as useful to me as like drums, or sorry, for drums per se, but for making things with metallic textures or making things with basses and all that, you can get some pretty cool stuff. So let's go ahead and take a listen to what we can get out of this. I lied. If you're designing a snare, this could actually be extremely helpful. But if you're throwing this over a drum group and you're just trying to get, you know, something of the sort, then that could be, you know, maybe a little bit more difficult to work with. But from an experimental standpoint, what's cool is that you have two LFOs and an envelope follower here. So you can map this stuff to anything, almost anything. There's maybe a couple of exceptions with the convolution reverb, but yeah, there's a lot of modulation sources and stuff that you could utilize. And then one thing with these nodes as well is that every single node respectively can have up to 3 different instances. You can also frequency split. I do say frequency split. You can band split, and you can create a frequency split if you utilize filters, say like a low, mid, and high. If you don't know what Beam is, by the way, we're going to focus just on node for now, but notice that you can do all this stuff, and I'll show you some patches where I've done that after I get done through the demo. So yeah, in any case, this is really cool. One of my favorite things to do is to actually take something like this and throw it through a time, because time is kind of like, it's kind of like halftime, if you're familiar with that, or Cable Guys plugins, or kind of like some infiltrator stuff or whatever. But basically it reintroduces a time adjustment that will change the pitch and speed of what it is that you're going through and then feed it back to you. I don't really know how to describe this plugin, but you've heard something like it before, grow speed, all that other stuff. I just really like this one because it's very clean and very easy to use. But if we turn this off and we just focus on the stretch, maybe say over the course, okay, sorry, we'll just leave that on to like 1 to 1, and then we start stretching this. Listen to what this is going to do. What's also really cool is we can just modulate this by adding a generator here. And if we wanted to change the pitch and all that other stuff, or we wanted to shuffle this and make it in reverse, we can do this on several steps that we can add. We can also make it off time. And so that way, this is a very fun and easy way to start cooking up different chops, or, you know, just beat breaking, or, you know, so many different things with that. So if we do that with the distortion, we can apply the filtering and all that other stuff. For example, let's say if we wanted to add to this and do something like pushing this through the grains here, we can set this to a rectangle shape that's going to be pretty consistent. And then we can set this to maybe like 1/8. And now that we're doing that, we're sending this into this, and it's just going to chop the sound up even more. And you can do this on any kind of sound, but this is why I like this, is because it's very experimental in a lot of cases. It also sounds very pretty if you're not using it for Volt, but I'll save that for a different time. Lots of texture and stuff through that. So in most cases, the way that I end up using this is something like this I have this thing called a beam angler. I've been holding out on you all. I'm sorry. I haven't been able to use this on stream, but I have something kind of like this to where I can set this up either with a volt or a time or something like that, and send it through this along with the delays, and just create all different kinds of cool textures. So if I were to just very quickly add in, I think this is an older version of Beam, that's why that didn't pull up. If we go here, we pull up something like one of these presets that are included called Board Breaker, then you can see here that we've got a little time thing that's adjusted to this, and it's already modulated randomly through these LFOs that I can utilize to destroy the sound even more. Yeah, so this is just for getting artifacts and glitches and stuff, but as you can see, you're not just limited to the plugin itself, it's also about how you think about how to use it with other things. So with that, let's go ahead and check out something like Polysynth. This is just something that I did on a previous recording, but we can go ahead and start from scratch. One thing that I wanted to do with this is just show you from a sine wave perspective what this sounds like, because I think that's extremely useful in deciding on, for one, if you put this into an oscilloscope, which I'm not going to do, you can see exactly what kind of distortion or what kind of harmonics this is adding. However, if we were to just kind of listen to it, this is a very fast way to create something like growls or get some very aggressive sounds in general. So this is just the sine wave. This is just kind of some sizzle on top. But I mean, this is a classic, you know, kind of halftime sound that just from turning all these up, we can kind of, you know what I mean? If we give this a little bit of a contour boost, which I believe is just a mid boost. Then we can use some feedback on here. One thing is that if you do have feedback on this, you probably want to start to reduce this. I think that the best case for utilizing this plugin, if you're just using distortion, is to have one that only has the distortion, and then another one that only, or you can definitely combine this and stuff, but you want to have another one that's kind of like this, that is only the feedback. Something else that you could do, depending on how, you know, savvy you are with design, is you could have a parallel chain kind of like this, to where both of these are at full. And then what you can do with this one is grab a filter and high pass this, and voila, we've got frequency splitting. So that's why I'm so excited about the volt thing, because it adds frequency splitting-esque things into bass design for this, kind of like how I mentioned before. And so now with this, we can do lots of things. Like we can have something like that. We can kind of try to combine them and glue them with another instance of maybe just some heat or some charge. But if we were to just solo this, this kind of adds that top in, which sounds really nice. And since this is top in, something else that we could do is we can add in some characterization by adding some space with perhaps a really small convolution reverb. So I'm just going to kind of fish for one. This is going to be huge, but if we were to back off of this, kind of like so, and change the fade here if possible to where we've got a little bit of this and just slowly ease that in. Or not. Or something else that we could do, which is really fun, is add our envelope follower here and make this move downward. We need to right click this and make this unipolar. So that way, whenever the signal is playing, it's going to duck the reverb. And then when we pull off of this, it's going to bring it back. And remember, this is just with the sine wave, you know? So if you take into account adding anything extra, say like an OTT or even a clipper, right? Like we can get some pretty gnarly sounds just by pushing this a little bit harder. Let's say we want to control this. Something else that we can do is grab a filter here and we can set this to a low pass. Maybe as low as you want it to go. Then we can grab a macro and then boom, we can go back, load that up, set this to unipolar. And now we have a macro here that we can control in order to manipulate this bass even further. Pretty easy. So the last thing that I want to talk about is also within an instance of utilizing this within a Reese bass. This is a preset that I made called Dungeon Shackles. It pretty much is kind of like a future garage bass, but by itself, it's just a Reese, which sounds like this. Then if we turn beam on, it sounds like this. And I just think it sounds nice. Like, this is great for garage, you know, like, you know, something like that. And then, of course, this is pretty much just linked to a filter, but... And there's other things that you can macro aside from a filter. It's just, generally speaking, that's what makes the most sense with a sound kind of like this. So, yeah, I think that Volt is a pretty important addition to Beam. There are some wish lists that I hope that they add in the future. Like, for example, nothing beats a wave shaper to me. If you have something that you can add a curve, you can pretty much create any kind of distortion that you want. The other thing is that I hope in the future that they add the ability to make the default preset to just nothing. So that way, whenever I go to default, it doesn't pull this up. It's not the end of the world, but, you know, I think that they already said that they're working on it. And other than that, I think that it's a really cool plugin that I utilize a lot. So one final example that might be worth looking into is just kind of how all this stuff comes together, not just with Volt, but with, you know, something, say, Melodic, that you can apply all this stuff together all at once and just from one patch. So one thing that I'm going to do is I've got an instance of Harmony Bloom right here along with this sequencer. And what we can do is just pull up an instance of FM4 again to make a quick bell. So let me go ahead and solo this. And let's go ahead and pull this back. And let me go ahead and flip this just a bit. And now what I'll do with this is set this to Command R. And now we can add something like beam. Then we can add something like this on a parallel chain. And, you know, we're just creating all different kinds of stuff here that, you know, is really cool for different types of, you know, melodic sounds or pads or things of the sort. Something else that we could do or that we can consider in order to making this patch is we can duck this kind of like so. And that way we can set this to unipolar. We can also do that with this one. So that way, whenever the plucks hit, it's not going to have any tail until the sound has already finished. And so personally, what I think is a lot of fun about this is that I know that I'm kind of playing all this and it's a little bit wild, but even still, I like to start with something in abundance. So that way, if I were to mute some of these other tracks, so something say kind of like this, and maybe we just have these two going and I simplify this, now I can actually start thinking about ideas to build a track. And then something that I can do is I can pull this into another space, kind of like so. And I can map this here for this macro. Maybe I want to change the melody. And then maybe we can add some distortion to make it a little bit darker. A little sharp, sorry. Now we're kind of getting into some other territory here. So anyways, this is something that I would sit down with and just mess with until I find something that I really like. But as you can see, it's very simple to get something going and to get, obviously ambient is the fastest way to utilize this and be like, oh, okay, I get what this is about. But there's a lot of other use cases that this really works for. So with the addition of volts, the thing that I think that is coolest is that it now creeps into the territory of not just melodics and drums, but also bass. And that kind of covers all of your areas or your main fundamentals for different types of sound design. Is this your, go-to thing, that you're going to use on every plugin? I can't decide for sure, but I definitely like the way that it trashes drums. I definitely like the interactions that it has and the fact that it has a granular effect built into it. If you're familiar with anything like Portal or whatever, this like totally blows it out of the water now because of how much more diversity it offers and how you can build complex chains kind of like this. So the last thing that I'll end you with is just a very quick frequency split thing that I've done, which is nothing crazy. This is more of a starting point as opposed to, like an ending point. But if you do have, something like a Reese or whatever, you can pull a patch up that I believe is included, something like Botnick's Doomsday. But what you'll see here is that we've got something that's a band pass, then we have a high pass here, and then a notch. So this is just very typical like neuro-based processing stuff, to where I'm focusing on the mid movement here, and then this is focusing on the high end stuff. Sorry, low mids, and then this is focusing on the high end stuff, and this will kind of like be a really cool place to start building and sculpting different kinds of neuro sounds too. I think that I had that soloed. Yeah. And so something else that's kind of cool with this, I'm going to make this just a little bit louder. Whenever I designed this, I made it relatively quiet, so that way you're inclined to turn it up rather than be like, oh my God, it's too loud. Yeah, but so you can kind of hear that within this, it's almost there. And I would dare say that, this could use just a little bit of OTT on the back end. But if we do that and we kind of pull this up just a little bit, then we've got some really nice starting places to work with for creating character with the sound. Because once you have something like this, so let's just see what this sounds like. Let's say we go here. Then what you can start doing is doing stuff like this. And I don't know what that's going to do, so I'm not going to destroy all of our ears together. But what I like about it is that, you know what I mean, it's a really good starting place to kind of start introducing more stuff. Yeah, that leads me to the other feature requests that I have. One thing that I would say is that it's great that we have the filters and whatnot, but if we could refine the filters to where it has a steeper slope, because these are so gentle. I've talked about this before, but the filtering and whatnot needs to be a little bit sharper in order to interact with the distortion in a way that I want it. And so one thing that, instead of changing these filters, that I would suggest is just provide a parametric EQ, something that is just, say, like 4 bands like this, create bells and curves, and then just let me shape it, just let me move that around. Like, let me scale it, let me move the whole thing like this, and then let me move the whole thing like this. And if we could do that, then this would be a really awesome bass machine for the kinds of sounds that I like to make. So anyways, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are regarding Beam. You can always reach out if you have any questions. Again, check out lunacy.audio. I'll leave a link in the description. It's not an affiliate link, even though it's going to look weird. It's directly for them. But I receive nothing off of this, even though this video in particular is sponsored. So thanks everybody. I appreciate your time, and I will see you in the next one.